I texted Dean around 9 in the morning. Fever won't break. Still can't hold anything down. It took him 10 minutes to reply. Just drink some tea, Mom. That was it. No. Are you okay? No. I'll stop by after work. Just tea. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, then turned it face down on the armrest. The room felt too large, too quiet. The television played an old nature documentary no one was watching. My blanket, thin from years of use, barely kept the chill from settling in. My skin was damp, but my lips were dry. I reached for the water glass on the coffee table, but my hand trembled too much. It tipped over. A soft splash against the rug. Jasper stirred from the foot of the couch, lifting his head. He didn't bark. He just looked. I picked up the phone again and pressed Dean's name. It rang. Once, twice, voicemail. I waited a few minutes, then tried again. Still nothing. Maybe he was busy. Maybe he thought I was exaggerating. Maybe he just didn't want to deal with it. I pulled the blanket tighter. My joints throbbed like they'd been holding me up too long. The ceiling fan turned slowly, doing nothing but stirring the cold air. Jasper climbed up to rest beside me, tucking his long legs neatly under his body. His chin rested near my shoulder, warm breath brushing against my sleeve. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind tapping the window pane. There was a time I used to worry if the power went out, if the stairs were too steep, if the faucet leaked. Now I just hoped I wouldn't need to get up for a while. Jasper shifted closer, the weight of him grounding. I reached out and touched his ear. "You're still here," I whispered. I hadn't eaten in almost 2 days, and the water was still on the floor. The next morning I woke with a pounding head and an empty stomach. My throat burned dry and my arms ached just lifting the blanket. Jasper hadn't moved far, still curled against the crook of my knees, watching me like I might vanish. I sat up slowly, teeth clenched. The world tilted sideways. I waited for it to steady before swinging my legs over the edge of the couch. The floor was cold under my feet, and my knees wobbled. Jasper whined the moment I stood. "I'm fine," I mumbled more to myself than him. He didn't believe me. Neither did I. The kitchen felt miles away. I moved in slow shuffles, one hand on the wall, the other pressed against my side. Everything inside me felt hollow and sore. I reached the pantry and grabbed a sleeve of saltines. My fingers fumbled with the plastic. The first cracker broke in half before I even lifted it to my mouth. I chewed slowly. It felt like eating gravel. My stomach lurched in protest. I didn't make it to the sink. After rinsing my mouth, I leaned against the counter, catching my breath. I filled a glass halfway with water. Hands trembling, I lifted it toward my lips, but the rim tapped my tooth and I lost grip. The glass shattered before I heard myself fall. I landed hard, shoulder first, then hip, then elbow. A flash of white burst behind my eyes, and the breath left my lungs in one sharp gasp. The tile pressed cold against my cheek, sticky with water. Jasper barked. Not a small sound, loud and panicked, one sharp burst, then another. I tried to speak, tried to lift my hand. The front door creaked. Jasper's paws scrambled across the hardwood. Then I heard the bang of the screen door swing open, and his barking moved outside. I didn't know if I could move again. I just closed my eyes and waited for the sound of his feet to return. I don't remember the moment I passed out. Just the sharp sting in my hip, the cold floor under my face, and Jasper's barking fading into the wind. After that, nothing. When I opened my eyes again, everything was blurred and bright. Voices above me echoing like they were in another room. A woman's voice first, then a man's calm and firm. Someone said my name, Morel. "Can you hear me?" I blinked, trying to nod. The ceiling swam. I tasted metal. A gloved hand touched my wrist, then my shoulder. She's breathing. Pulse is there. Let's get her on the stretcher. I tried to lift my arm, but it felt like stone. Someone brushed a warm blanket over me. I turned my head just enough to see Jasper, his fur-matted paws, muddy, panting at the edge of the room. He was trying to climb onto the stretcher. "Easy, buddy," one of the paramedics said. "She's okay now." Another voice came closer. "I'm her neighbor," a woman said. Margaret Kellerman. The dog came to my back door, scratching like mad. I thought something was wrong. Her voice broke. I'm glad I listened. They rolled me outside into the morning light. Sirens muted. Someone was talking again. "Ma'am, do you have anyone we should notify?" I opened my mouth, but no sound came. My throat burned. My lips cracked. The question floated above me, waiting. I thought of Dean, his number, his silence. And then I looked at Jasper, pacing beside the gurney, still trying to keep up, still refusing to leave my side. I raised my hand barely an inch and pointed at him. The paramedic followed my gesture, then gave a small nod. Got it. They lifted me into the ambulance. I could hear Jasper whining softly before the doors closed. Even then, I knew he would be there when they opened again. When I came to, the first thing I noticed was the steady click of the IV pump beside me. The second was the weight in my limbs, as if someone had filled my bones with wet sand. I blinked up at the pale ceiling, trying to piece together how I'd gotten here. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic. A thin blanket covered me. My mouth felt dry and my tongue stuck to my teeth. I shifted a little and a dull ache shot through my hip. A nurse noticed I was awake and came over with a gentle smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Dorset. You gave your neighbor quite a scare." I tried to return the smile, but my face barely moved. "How long?" "Since yesterday afternoon," she said, checking the monitor. "You were dehydrated and running a high fever. You're stable now. Just weak." I nodded, letting my eyes drift around the room. No cards, no flowers, no familiar jacket hung on the chair. The nurse followed my gaze, softened, and added quietly, "I should tell you, your dog has been waiting outside the gate since last night. Security said he hasn't moved much. Just sits there. For the first time in hours, maybe longer, something inside me warmed. He's here." My voice cracked on the word. She nodded. "He's persistent. We tried coaxing him away, but he refuses to leave." I closed my eyes, letting out a slow breath. Jasper, muddy paws and all, sitting in the cold, somewhere beyond the parking lot fence. Loyal in a way that didn't make sense unless you felt it the way he did, simple and absolute. The nurse adjusted my pillow. "Rest for now. We'll see about getting someone to bring him some water." Someone. Anyone but the person who should have been here. I turned my face toward the window, even though I couldn't see the gate from this room. I pretended I could picture him anyway. Ears perked, tail still waiting for a door to open. He was out there, and no one else was coming. I let my eyes close, the faint beeping of the monitors steadying my breath, and felt the quiet settle into the space he'd left beside me. Late in the afternoon, the nurse brought in a small plastic bag with my belongings. She placed it gently on the side table and said, "Your phone's charged. Thought you might want it." I thanked her with a nod, then reached slowly for the bag. My fingers still shook, but not from illness anymore. The screen lit up when I tapped it. No missed calls, no voicemails, no messages. I opened our last thread. The message I'd sent: "Fever won't break. Still can't hold anything down." Underneath it, that small gray text, "Read. Friday, 41 a.m. He'd seen it. And then nothing. I stared at the screen for a long time, like something might appear if I waited. A check-in, a weak apology, even just a question mark. But it stayed blank. My thumb hovered over the call button. I didn't press it. Instead, I opened my contacts and scrolled down until I reached his name. Dean Dorset, son. I used to have a heart emoji next to it. I'd removed that over a year ago. I closed the screen and placed the phone face down on the tray. The silence in the room thickened. Machines hummed. The hallway door clicked open and shut with passing nurses. But inside that silence, there was only one truth left. He knew. And he chose not to come. The realization settled heavier than the fever ever had. Not dramatic, not loud. Just final. A thread had been cut. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from pain, just from knowing. I turned off the monitor light, then reached again for my phone. I powered it down completely. If he wasn't going to call, I didn't want to see the absence of it blinking at me. I lay back and stared at the ceiling. Jasper still out there waiting somewhere beyond the gates. And I thought maybe loyalty doesn't come from blood. Maybe it just knows where to sit and stay. By morning, they said I might be ready to go home. They wheeled me out through the side doors, the sun low and soft on the pavement. I squinted against the light, blinking slowly as we reached the gate. And there he was. Jasper stood up the second he saw me. He didn't bark, didn't leap. Just wagged his tail once, then fell in step beside the wheelchair as the nurse guided me forward. He kept close, head low, watchful eyes flicking between me and the sidewalk. Not a single part of me was surprised he'd stayed. The nurse smiled, shaking her head. That dog's been out here nearly 2 days. Didn't move unless someone got too close to the gate. I didn't say much on the drive home. Just leaned against the window, fingers brushing Jasper's fur where he sat, pressed up against the back seat. At the house, everything was exactly as I'd left it. The lights still out. The overturned water glass still lying beside the couch. I'd clean it later. I eased myself onto the bench out front, breath shallow but steady. Jasper followed and settled at my feet, curling in like he was afraid to touch too much. He laid his head on top of my foot with a quiet sigh. I stared at the old mailbox, the cracked paint on the railing, the leaves gathering in the corner of the porch. Then I said it. He didn't even ask if I was okay. Not a whisper, not to the wind, just out loud. It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't anger. It was just the truth. Jasper didn't move. I looked down at him, his soft eyes blinking up once, as if to say, I know. We sat there for a long time, the sun warming the wood beneath us, the air still. I reached down and smoothed the fur behind his ears. He didn't flinch. Tomorrow, I'd start sorting through the papers, the stack I hadn't touched in months. But tonight, I'd sit with the one soul who never left. The next morning, I took my coffee to the kitchen table and opened the manila envelope marked discharge papers. I moved slowly, careful not to strain the side that still ached, but steady enough to hold a pen. Most of the forms were standard. Follow-up appointments, prescription notes, a gentle reminder to rest. But halfway down the stack was a single sheet titled Emergency Contact Update. I stared at the blank line for a long while. It still had Dean's name printed faintly in the old box left over from a visit 2 years ago. I drew a single line through it. In the space beneath, I wrote Margaret Kellerman, neighbor. Answered the knock no one else heard. I set the pen down. My hand didn't tremble this time. Jasper lay by the heater watching me like always. I'm not mad, I told him softly. And I wasn't. Anger takes too much energy. Disappointment just stays quiet. I stood and walked to the bedroom, opened the bottom drawer of my desk, and pulled out another folder. One I hadn't looked at since Carl passed. The will. I read through it slowly. Lips pressed tight. The clauses were clean and simple. My small savings, the house, the life insurance policy. Page 3 had Dean's name listed clearly as the sole beneficiary. I stared at that line, remembering how proud I'd been to keep things tidy, to make it easy for him, to make sure he'd be okay. Then I reached for a pen. I removed his name, and in the margins I added a new clause, funds, to be set aside for the lifelong veterinary care, food, and comfort of Jasper Shepherd Mix, age 9. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It was fair. Jasper stretched his legs and came over, nudging his nose against my thigh. "I see you," I whispered. "I always have." I closed the folder, pressed it flat, and placed it back in the drawer. There was still one more step to take. I needed to visit the notary. A week passed before the phone finally rang with Dean's name on the screen. I was in the living room folding a small blanket for the couch when the vibration buzzed against the table. Jasper lifted his head at the sound, ears pricked. I didn't move to answer. I watched it ring until the screen dimmed again. A minute later, the voicemail icon appeared. I tapped it, not out of hope, just to clear the notification. "Hey, Mom. Heard you were sick. Everything okay? Call me back." His voice sounded distracted, like he was talking while doing something else. No urgency. No worry. Just words strung together to sound like concern. I sat down slowly on the edge of the couch. Then with a steady thumb, I deleted the message. Not out of spite, not out of anger, just because there was nothing left to hold on to. Jasper climbed up beside me, resting his head on my thigh. His weight was familiar grounding, in a way nothing else had been lately. I reached for his brush, the old wooden one Carl had bought years ago. The bristles were worn in the center, but they still glided through Jasper's coat with a soft whisper. He sighed long and content as I worked through the tangles behind his ears. Each stroke slowed my breathing. Each one eased something tight inside me. "Thank you," I murmured into the quiet room. I wasn't sure if I meant for the hospital gate, the barking, or every small thing before and after. Maybe all of it. He shifted closer, pressing his nose against my wrist before settling again. Outside, a few cars passed on the road. Faraway sounds. Inside, just the brush moving through fur and the faint rhythm of Jasper's breathing. By the time I set the brush down, the sky outside had turned pale. I turned off the lamp, letting the room fall into a soft dim. Tomorrow, I told myself, I'd gather the papers and visit the notary. Tonight, I let the silence stay where it was. Saturday morning came gentle, the way I like it. No alarms, no obligations, just the clink of mugs and the quiet scuffle of Jasper's paws as he stretched beside the door. Mrs. Kellerman came by with her usual knock 2 short taps, then one longer one, and a small tin of lemon cookies. She never stayed long, but she always brought something. Today it was conversation more than sweets. We sat on the porch with our coffee, the breeze light enough to lift the edges of the old tablecloth. Jasper dozed nearby, one ear twitching every now and then, as if to keep time with our words. "I replanted the tomatoes," she said. "Moved them closer to the fence for more sun. Smart?" I nodded. "Mine always get leggy if I leave them by the side steps." We talked about soil, about mulch, about the mailbox down the street that someone backed into again. We didn't talk about my son. Not anymore. I think she knew better than to ask, and I was glad for it. The quiet between us wasn't heavy, it was full of understanding. After she left, I stood slowly, hands on the armrest to steady myself. My balance wasn't what it used to be, but my feet knew the path. Jasper fell into step beside me, patient and unhurried. He didn't nudge, didn't rush, just stayed close, watching every step, like a shadow that loved me. We walked along the fence line, checking where the wind had loosened a board. I bent to pick up a few sticks, tossing them into the compost pile. Jasper nosed the grass near the gate, sniffing something only he understood. The air smelled like earth and old wood, the kind of scent that doesn't beg for attention, just reminds you where you are, and that you're still here. By the time we made it back to the porch, I felt the ache in my knees, but also a steadiness in my chest. I poured a second cup of coffee and sat back down. Jasper curling beside me once more. The notary appointment was set for Monday. The sky was turning that soft orange it only gets in early spring, warm but not bold. a slow color that crept along the tops of the trees and settled on the edge of the porch like a shawl. Jasper lay beside me, just as he always did, head resting on the top of my foot. I could feel the rise and fall of his breathing, slow and certain, like the ticking of a well-kept clock. I didn't need to check my phone. It was inside, silent, on the kitchen counter. No one was calling, and for once I didn't expect them to. I didn't hope or dread. I just let the quiet be. The papers were signed, the updates done, my name, my wishes, my care, all where they needed to be. Neat. Secure. I had tucked the new folder into the cabinet behind the old recipes, the ones I hadn't touched since Carl passed. I sipped the last of my lukewarm coffee and set the cup down gently beside me. The porch creaked as I shifted in my seat, but the ache in my bones was smaller than it used to be. Jasper stirred slightly at the sound, lifting his head just enough to look up at me. I smiled and reached down to stroke the soft fur behind his ear, the same way I had so many times before. "You knew I mattered, didn't you?" I said softly. He didn't wag his tail, didn't bark, just closed his eyes and leaned into my hand. That was answer enough. The light faded slowly, casting longer shadows across the porch boards. Somewhere in the distance, a screen door shut, and a child's voice called out. But here it was still, familiar, steady. I leaned back, folded my hands in my lap, and let my eyes close for just a moment. Not to escape, not to forget. Just to rest next to the one who never needed reminding that I was worth staying for.